About a year and a half ago, I made a video called AronRa's Double Standard. Now, I want to start by pointing out some claims that I made that were incorrect in that video. I made the claim that Michael Behe never said the word explanation in his testimony, and AronRa did show that yes, he did in fact say explanations when referring to the evolution of the immune system. This was due to a technical error on my part where I did a keyword search for the word explanation through the browser rather than the PDF search bar. Although I find it hard to find a clear definition of explanation according to science elsewhere, AronRa did define it pretty much the same way as Kenneth Miller does in his testimony. I think Mr. Ra is probably right about explanation being the same as a detailed testable answer. I believe I base some of my previous arguments on a definition of explanation that is inappropriate in the context of science. In the interest of staying on topic, I want to stress that although I am a young Earth creationist myself, the main topic of my last video and this video is not on the merits of creation or intelligent design, but on whether or not AronRa meets his own criteria when labeling most creationists liars, more specifically Michael Behe in the Kitzmiller versus Dover trial. Now, AronRa got me in a aha moment saying Behe didn't say something he indeed said. I concede that. However, none of this proves Behe a liar by AronRa's standard or changes the fact that AronRa uses a double standard. In fact, in his video response, he further demonstrates this as well as adding dishonesty.
A lie isn't simply something that you don't want to agree with. A lie is a false statement presented as true, or a truth misrepresented to appear false with a deliberate attempt to deceive. Find any statement the scientist actually made, quoted verbatim, that you think is a lie. Show how the statement is wrong, and more importantly, show how the scientist who said it knew it was wrong before he said it. See, I wouldn't accuse anyone of lying before I could do at least that, but then I was raised by the sort of people who believe men should have a code of honor.
I pointed out in my first video that this standard is fine, but that he has a double standard because it doesn't always apply to his criticism of creationists. This is still true. So first, let's address some of the problems with AronRa's reply. Then we'll lead into how none of it meets AronRa's own standard for a lie. So here's a clip from my original video, AronRa's Double Standard.
Aron also went on to say that the only honest answer Behe could have given was to say he hadn't read them and therefore could not have known if they met the criteria or not. How do you know he never read any of them?
This was his reply.
Because he said so. Behe stated openly and repeatedly that he hadn't read them. He even admitted on the stand that he'd effectively only Googled science articles for the phrase random mutation, and if those words didn't appear in any relevant title, then he assumed and confidently declared that no such content exists. A rather ironic statement coming from someone arguing for the existence of something for which there is no evidence. Then, once he was shown that these articles did exist, albeit with more appropriate titles, there was a point when he even gave what I already said was the only honest answer he could give. But then he went on weaseling.
Okay, so you say, then, once he was shown that these articles did exist, as though the next quote takes place after the previous quotes, when in reality this just isn't true. The truth is that Behe said, I certainly haven't looked through these 50 articles, because he was talking about just that, articles. The books haven't even come out yet.
He even admitted on the stand that he'd effectively only Googled science articles for the phrase random mutation, and if those words didn't appear in any relevant title, then he assumed and confidently declared that no such content exists.
Wrong! Behe, when referring to one of the 8 articles presented by Kenneth Miller, says the phrase random mutation and natural selection does not occur in the body of the paper. And this isn't the only occasion. When referring to the articles, the defense asks Behe, yet they don't mention random mutation or natural selection in the body of the works? Behe replies, that's correct. This straw man thrashing about Behe only Google searching relevant titles seems quite ironic coming from someone who Googles a chart on the growth of atheism in America, but turns out that that chart comes from New Zealand. Speaking of which, since you obviously have done such searches, why do you act as though you haven't and ridicule Behe because he has? Even if Behe had only searched relevant titles, something tells me it would have come up with more accurate results than your recent searches. By the way, since it takes more than just seeing or hearing a title to fully know what it contains, how then could the judge know that Behe wasn't correct in saying it wasn't sufficient evidence or wasn't good enough? I mean, now we know Behe didn't actually say that, but if he did, how could the judge know if the new 50 articles, 9 books, and several chapters were never demonstrated to actually contain what Rothschild said they contained, except to read the titles?
But then he went on weaseling. Once he realized this meant he would actually have to concede an error on behalf of creationism, something he is not permitted to do, then he boldly proclaimed his certainty that none of these works could actually be what they all said they were, and he made that judgment even though he didn't even know about most of them, and never indicated that he'd actually read any of them.
So where were we? Yes. Here we see another example of AronRa's dishonest tactics. Let me show you what I mean. So here we have the same quote we saw before. Aaron then says, once he realized he would have to concede error, he then went on to boldly proclaim. And then Aaron shows another quote from Behe saying that they do not address his question. Now, of course, the implication here being, how could Behe know that if he just said he hadn't read them? So again, we see AronRa create the impression that the latter quote takes place after the previous one. But yet again, he finds it necessary to transpose the quotes. This particular time, it is especially egregious when you find out the dialogue was based on the original 8 articles and not on the new 50 that were introduced. See, AronRa tries to create the impression that Behe boldly proclaimed his certainty about articles that he hadn't read, when in reality Behe was justified in what he said because he was referring to the original 8 articles he had read, and the 50 he hadn't read hadn't even been presented yet. See, it seems to me that AronRa doesn't care much to know the real context of the transcript dialogue. No, Mr. Ra only seems interested in labeling all well-known creationists as liars, even if that means transposing quotes and taking them out of context, inserting misleading dialogue, or adding emphasis and exclamation to make them look frantic and caught in their supposed lie. Some code of honor. But the dishonesty doesn't stop there.
Actually be what they all said they were, and he made that judgment even though he didn't even know about most of them, and never indicated that he'd actually read any of them.
Wrong. Remember this quote that AronRa uses? Well, there is more to that answer. I have read those papers that I presented, though, yesterday on the immune system. So what are the papers that Behe is referring to here? The original 8 articles that he conducted the search of random mutation and natural selection on day 11 a.m. that even Mr. Rothschild admits are included in the 58 articles. And furthermore, he even alludes to that fact in the very next line of the transcripts when he asked Behe, and the 58 articles, some yes, some no? Something you failed to see even when posting in your own video. The very same video that contends he never indicated that he read any of them. But there is something else that needs to be addressed here. Let's go over that again. So you try to prove Behe didn't read any of the papers or books by showing his quotes. But then you leave out something, don't you? Wow. See, I believe they have a word for that, don't they? For someone who consistently accuses creationists of this seems just slightly hypocritical, especially coming from someone who tries to prove my cited quotes are quote mines by showing an example of some other quote I never cited. No, I need no help defining what a quote mine is, or what a straw man is for that matter. You've helped well enough by giving such great examples like calling me a liar for saying evolutionists can't be Christians, even though I never said that, or saying this.
You still failed to produce one scientist who lied in promoting evolution over creationism. despite your many accusations.
Even though I never made even one such accusation, let alone many.
Speaking of which, since you apparently haven't read the court transcripts yourself, why do you pretend as though you have and ridicule me as though I had not?
I did read the transcripts, which should have been obvious, seeing as they were being shown on my video as I read them. It is obvious now that you also have read them for the same reason. Sure, you could say reciting a few lines isn't the same as reading them, but I could also say you can't count because you're unaware that 16 comes before 18. And I'm not ridiculing you for not reading the transcripts. I'm only pointing out your willingness to twist the facts to your benefit. Now, all this being said, Behe still has a problem. I found 4 instances after all of the 58 articles were presented where Behe mentions the veraciousness of the articles he hadn't read. I will be adding emphasis only to indicate key words, not to imply actual emphasis when they were spoken. Now, remember, the charge is that Behe has
A deliberate attempt to deceive.
So we have to put down what we personally believe and base our reasoning just for a moment on what Behe believes if we are to determine his intent. Behe did say the articles do not address the question I pose, even after he claimed he hadn't read them. But if Behe wanted to deliberately deceive, why would he be so careful before and after he said it? One could infer that this indicates he misspoke the one time due to the fact that there was more consistency in the other 3 quotes. However, this is just speculation and hardly ironclad. But then again, it certainly cast enough doubt that you couldn't say with any certainty that he did intend to deceive. Behe also further explains by saying you don't have to go back and read every article on a particular topic to get up to speed. Now, whether this is valid is irrelevant, but what is relevant is that Behe believed it was valid. So again, where is the proof he deliberately intended to deceive?
Instead, it seems the Discovery Institute spoon-fed this argument to you and you swallowed it without looking. Then, in what seems to be an attempt to project your own faults onto me, you accused the judge of not having heard or considered the case, and you accused me of not having done so either, when we both obviously have.
Right, okay. You have a tendency to put words in my mouth. So let me be clear on what I actually said. I said the transcripts got little attention from the judge or you. And it's hard to imagine they did. You both claim Behe said they're not good enough, even though the transcripts show he said exactly the opposite. And if you understand the difference between Behe's definition of Darwinian evolution and evolution, you couldn't infer that he did. I wish you well, Aaron. I really do. Most of all, because I know you're an atheist, I hope you come to know the saving knowledge of Christ. But before you can accept the good news, you have to know the bad news. And I'm not helping you or anybody by going easy on you. I mean, you sit there and tell me with a straight face that you're not the one with the double standard. You're not the hypocrite. Yet you transpose transcript quotes in whatever order you wish, take quotes out of context, mislead with your dialogue, emphasis, and exclamation, quote mine while falsely accusing me of the same, attack me for claims I never made, falsely accuse me and Behe of lying while failing to prove we meet your standard of a lie, all while professing a code of honor. I mean, what other choice have you given people but to conclude you're a dishonest, straw man bashing, quote mining, honorless hypocrite with a double standard?